What's up guys, we just have a quick video for you today. We're going to be changing the valve cover gasket on my 2003 Honda Accord. It's a K24A4, but it's similar for most K-series engines. So let's jump into it. As you can see, we have a puddle of oil from the valve cover leaking, which is not what you want. And like right here on this bolt is leaking pretty bad. So we're gonna go ahead and change this out and we'll walk you through the process. We're gonna jump right into it. Looks like a lot of 10mm bolts. So we're gonna pull off this cover first thing, and that's 10 mils right here. And we're gonna remove this black cover that's covering up the spark plugs and coils. And to change out this valve cover, we have to remove the coils, but we can leave in the spark plugs. So these are all 10 mils. And I'll disconnect these just so they don't get damaged at all and set those to the side. And then this harness can get flipped over the back here and out of the way. Now we've got these two 10mm bolts holding on a bunch of lines to the valve cover. So we're just gonna go ahead and take those off. Now those won't get in the way of us pulling off the valve cover. Next we're gonna pull out oil dipstick, and we're gonna set this somewhere clean so it doesn't pick up a bunch of grease or dirt. And we're gonna start removing bolts holding on the valve cover. So we've got this corner one, the middle one, other side. And we've got two in the back. And then one more right here. And that should be all the bolts holding on the valve cover. Probably need to disconnect this hose. That way we can remove the valve cover and make sure the gasket's on all the way. Just tighten that guy up. You may be able to just wiggle this hose off, but it's been on there for a hot minute in my case, so we're gonna take a screwdriver and gently pry it off there. There we go. And we should be able to just pry this guy up. Right, and we should be able to work this guy out. Woo! So we've got our new Felpro gasket, and this gasket comes with all the grommets and everything you need. So the only other thing you're gonna need is RTV. I like the Permatex black, and as long as it's a high temp RTV, you should be good. We're going to be applying it to the corners here where it goes into this U shape of the valve cover, and we're going to be applying it right here because that's where there's a seam for the timing chain cover, and you want to make sure those seal really well. So I've got a small mechanics pick, and I'm just gonna go ahead and try and pry this out. Oh yeah, hear that? This thing is old and crusty. And then we have to remove these 4 grommets that go around the coils. And with this pry bar, I'm gonna pop out the grommets that go around the coils. Ooh. Okay. Pop that out like so. That's one out. We kind of mangled it, but like I said, our kit comes with new ones, so it doesn't really matter. So we'll pop the rest of these out. These are pretty old and crusty. I don't know if this has ever been chained. It definitely hasn't since I've owned it. So you might have to really pry on these. Just try not to damage the side walls or scrape. Oh. So we've got this cleaned up pretty good. It's not perfect, but we aren't trying to paint this or anything. So next we just need to clean out the groove where the gasket sits. So I'm just gonna run a towel in there with some degreaser and make sure that's a nice clean surface. And we're going to set our gasket in there like so. All right, and you just want to make sure that's fully seated everywhere, and that's looking pretty good. Now that we've got our valve cover in place, we've inserted these 4 spark plug tube grommets and press them in as far as we can get them by hand. And now we're just gonna take one of the old grommets, and to get these fully seated, we're just gonna take a rubber mallet and tap all the way around the edge until they sit flush. There we go. And that's the same process for all 4 of those. We've already cleaned and degreased the surface on the block. So the next step is to apply our RTV along this edge and on these corners. From the factory, there's a seam on this side on both of these for the timing chain cover. So we're gonna apply a small amount of RTV just so that seals well. And on these corners where it starts the U shape. Now we're back over to the engine and we're gonna flip this upside down. The gasket should stay in place, but we'll just be very gentle with it. And we're just gonna set that in place. There we go. Now you wanna be super careful that you don't get any of the O-rings around the spark plug tubes pinched or not seated properly. So you may have to use a little bit of silicone or something on the inside to help ease that process. Ours look all good. We're going to install our 6 new metal grommets that came with our valve cover and the 6 nuts that held them on. So one's gonna go here, here, there, and then one in the back, one here, and the last one right there. And these are getting tightened down to 8.7 foot-pounds, which is barely more than hand tight. So we're gonna get all of these started and hit them with a wrench real quick. And we're just gonna torque these down in kind of a random pattern so they all get torqued evenly. And double check all of them. The next thing I like to do, and you could have done this before you tighten this all down, is I take a little mirror and check along all the edges just to make sure our gasket didn't get pinched anywhere, especially along the back and along any edges you can't really see, or else it's gonna leak even worse than it did before. Our gasket looks like it's sealed really well all the way around all the edges, so we can start putting everything back together. We're basically just gonna do the opposite of what we did to take it off. So first thing I'm gonna do is reinstall this hose and clip. Next, we're gonna reinstall our coils and flip over our harness and get those all plugged in. Give those each a firm press and make sure they're around the spark plug, and we can reinstall the bolts. And yours may be a little different, but mine have studs on the first and third spark plug holes, so I'll put those there, and the regular bolts on the other 2, and double check them with a wrench. And we're gonna reinstall the 2 10mm bolts that held on this bracket. And we're gonna reinstall our bracket for the power steering line here, and ours kind of fell down the line there a little bit, so we can just grab that and reinstall our 10mm bolt. Now we can reinstall the coil cover and reinstall these 10mm weird looking screws. And we've got 2 more 10 mils that hold that on. And you don't want to over tighten these because they'll actually tighten down the coils even more if you over tighten them. Then we can reinstall our dipstick. Before we reinstall this final cover, I'm gonna give everything a hose down with some brake cleaner, especially along the edges where we had oil leaking out of the old valve cover. And that'll make sure we can see any new leaks if we have any, and just clean up the whole thing. Now we can reinstall this cover. For this job, you don't have to change the oil. We didn't even drain it, and we were able to do this, but you probably want to double check and top it off and run the car and check for leaks. If you like this video, like the video. If you want to subscribe for more, and we'll catch you on the next one.